let's see the bone manifestation of CKD. So what are the changes in bone and what are the changes on the blood vessels due to the bone? So first of all, see, after the stage 3 progressing to stage 4, usually the GFR decreases below than 60 ml per minute, and due to the decline in the GFR, first of all, the excretion of the phosphate is decreased. What happens? Whatever the phosphate is produced from the bone, so let's suppose this is a bone, and in a normal mineralization process, actually calcium and phosphate actually comes into the blood. Calcium and phosphate comes into the blood, and normally what happens, the phosphate should be excreted, but due to the decreasing GFR, the phosphate is not excreted. The phosphate is now not excreted. So ultimately there is a phosphate retention. There is phosphate retention in the blood, and if the phosphate is not excreted from the body, it is retained in the blood, then what happens? The phosphate will bind to the free calcium. The phosphate will bind to the free calcium of the blood, and as the phosphate will bind to the free calcium blood, then the free calcium level decreases. Then the free calcium level in blood, what happens? It decreases, and it leads to the hypocalcemia. Let me again repeat. Due to in CKD, after the stage 3, usually the excretion GFR is decreased, so the excretion of phosphate is also decreased. Phosphate is normally produced in the bone mineralization, that is in the bone breakage, and now the phosphate is not excreted. It means the phosphate is retaining in the blood, and the retained extra phosphate in the blood will bind to the calcium present in the blood, so free calcium in the blood decreases and leading to the hypocalcemia. Another thing, whenever the GFR decreased, then there will be the calcitriol, yani vitamin D3 synthesis also decreased. So the active form of vitamin is actually decreased in case of the stage 3, and when the active form of vitamin D is decreased, GI absorption, yani ki gastrointestinal absorption of the calcium is decreased, and when the gastrointestinal absorption of calcium is decreased, it also leads to the hypocalcemia. So in this way, there will be the hypocalcemia developing in the case of CKD. And once the hypocalcemia is achieved, then the hypocalcemia basically stimulates the parathyroid gland, and the parathyroid gland, in response to the hypocalcemia, increases the hormone, that is parathormone, and lately there will be increase in the growth of the gland also. So ultimately there will be increased growth of the parathyroid gland and increased level of the parathyroid hormone. This is known as secondary hyperparathyroidism. There will be there will be more bone turnover, and due to the more bone turnover, there will be more resorption. So more resorption, and as there is a more resorption of bone, the more calcium and phosphate are released in the blood. And due to which the bone becomes fragile and weak, and as the bone becomes fragile and weak, that there can be the bone pain as a clinical feature, and there can be the pathological fracture of the bone. So there can be the pathological fracture of bone. So in a simple trivial type of trauma also, you can have the bone fracture, and the reason is, you know, that the parathyroid gland acts on the bone, and this parathyroid hormone, when acts on the bone, they will actually cause the bone resorption, and due to which there will be more actually calcium and phosphate is released in the blood, and due to which the bone becomes fragile, weak, and there will be pathological fracture of the bone. And on histology, the bone shows abnormal osteoid. Osteoid means the bone-like structures, and in bone marrow you can see the bone marrow fibrosis. In the bone marrow you can see the bone cyst, the presence of the bone cyst, and that's why this disease is known as osteitis fibrosa cystica, as there is a cyst, presence of cyst, fibrosis, osteoid, so the name is osteitis fibrosa cystica. So this happens in case of the CKD. So this is a very common thing in the CKD patient in the advanced stages, that the patient will develop this condition, and there will be the bone pain, fragile bone, and as there is a bone marrow fibrosis, so this fibrosed part of the bone marrow, this fibrosed part of bone marrow will not take part in RBC production. So this part will not produce RBC. So will not produce RBC, and it will also contribute to anemia. It will also contribute to anemia. So you saw now that the anemia is also due to decreased erythropoietin production, and anemia is also due to the fibrosis of the bone marrow. So this is actually the bone manifestation in the patient of CKD. So there is one MCQ question that what is the type of anemia that develops in the patient of CKD? So the answer is the anemia is basically normocytic normochromic anemia. So what is normocytic normochromic anemia? So normocytic means the shape and size of each RBC is normal. So whatever the RBC is present in the blood vessel, the shape and size of the RBC is normal. So it is known as normocytic. And normochromic means the amount of hemoglobin in a particular in one RBC is already normal. So the hemoglobin amount is also normal. But why there is anemia? So anemia is basically due to decrease in number of RBC. So the number of RBC is decreased, but there is no problem in shape and no problem in size. There is no problem in the amount of hemoglobin in each RBC. In stage 4 and 5, we already saw that the phosphate excretion was decreased, and due to which there was increased level of phosphate. The increased level of phosphate is known as hyperphosphatemia. That is, there is an increased level of phosphate in the blood, and the phosphate increase in the blood, they bind to calcium. I have said you already that the phosphate will bind to the calcium, and now the calcium and phosphate start to deposit in the tunica media of the blood vessels and also in the heart valves. So the calcium and phosphate start to deposit in the tunica media of the vessels and heart valves. Ultimately, this is known as vascular calcification. This is known as vascular calcification. This was, and another recent theory also says that there actually hyperphosphatemia induces change in the gene expression in the vascular cells. The hyperphosphatemia also induces the change in gene expression in the vascular cells, and due to which the vascular cells transform into osteoblast. The vascular cell is now transforming into osteoblast, and the osteoblast will ultimately attach calcium with them, and if they will now attach more calcium with them, as they are now what? Osteoblast. So they will also cause the vascular calcification. So in this way, previous the scientists were thinking that why the calcium and phosphate were deposited in the blood vessels. Then they get to know that they were deposited in the blood vessels because the blood vessel cells are now acting like a osteoblast due to the change in the gene expression, and due to which there is a vascular calcification. And this vascular calcification basically has a number of serious effects. We will talk later, but yes, the main aim was to tell you that there is a vascular calcification in the later stages of CKD, and it is seen that the vascular calcification, the magnitude of the vascular calcification, that is the magnitude of the vascular calcification is directly proportional to the hyperphosphatemia. That if there is increasing hyperphosphatemia, there will be increased vascular calcification. So now we will see that a very very rare, not so much common, but yes, you have to know this condition, very much important for the entrance point of view, that is known as calciphylaxis. Now let's study the calciphylaxis. So calciphylaxis is also known as calcium uremic arteriolopathy. What happens in the calciphylaxis? Let's suppose this is a hand of a person, and this is, I have shown the watch so that you can know this is a simply hand. My figure is not good, just make you to understand. And let's suppose this is a bone. and let's suppose the green color is showing the fat. The green color is showing the fat, and these are the red color is showing the blood vessels. The red color is showing the blood vessels. And you should know one thing, that if the amount of the calcium, if there is a phosphate increase in the blood, so if there is a phosphate is increased in the blood, I said you that this increased phosphate, the increased phosphate will ultimately bind calcium, and the calcium phosphate will now goes into the blood vessels, and when it goes into the smaller blood vessels, when this calcium phosphate enters smaller vessels, especially of fat, so whatever the fat layer in this fat layer of skin, so when the calcium enters the vessels of fat layer of skin, so they will ultimately the calcium, you know that the calcium is an important agent for the formation of clot. So calcium is important agent for the formation of clot. So the calcium will ultimately lead to the clotting of the blood in the smaller vessels, and now the smaller vessels are blocked, and the smaller vessels are blocked, they will ultimately cause the ischemia, and ultimately will lead to the necrosis. So this is I want you to know that the ultimately the in the skin there can be necrosis type of manifestation, as you can see in the picture. There is a necrosis seen in the skin at a different sites due to the calciphylaxis, and this is a condition you may encounter in the patient of chronic kidney disease. So now you should understand that the vitamin K actually leads to the generation of matrix GLA protein. So there is a type of GLA protein, matrix GLA protein. So this matrix GLA protein is basically produced by the vitamin K, and this protein actually prevent the vascular calcification, and they prevent the calciphylaxis. They also prevent calciphylaxis. But if the patient will be on the chronic warfarin therapy, but let's suppose if the patient is on chronic warfarin therapy, so in the chronic warfarin therapy, what happen? The vitamin K is inhibited, and when the vitamin K is inhibited, let's suppose if any CKD patient is on chronic warfarin therapy. So as the patient is of CKD, the CKD disease will promote the vascular calcification. And the disease will also promote the formation of calciphylaxis. But the vitamin K is actually inhibiting the vascular calcification. And if the person is taking the chronic warfarin therapy, though vitamin K is also inhibited, and now the vascular calcification will not be prevented, and actually chronic warfarin therapy actually progresses or rapidify the process of calciphylaxis, and we can say that they will induce the rapid calciphylaxis in the case of CKD. So we should know that the warfarin leads to rapid calciphylaxis, and that's why in the case of CKD, try not to give warfarin, especially for long time. So for long time you should not give the warfarin, but short time you can give. In very short time it will not lead to rapid calciphylaxis, but for the long time the warfarin therapy will lead to the rapid calciphylaxis, and this is somehow very bad condition. It can lead to the death also. Now you should know one thing, that the chronic kidney disease is actually associated with the cardiovascular disease, and actually the mortality in CKD disease is especially due to the cardiovascular disease, due to the number of factors. So you should keep one thing in mind, that usually the patients of CKD dies, so they die especially due to the cardiovascular disease. So you should know one thing, that the CKD is seen actually to produce cardiovascular disease and to worsen the cardiovascular disease. Worsen if already present. So if there is already presence of any cardiovascular disease, then the CKD will worsen them, or either the CKD will produce the cardiovascular disease, and ultimately the death in the CKD patient is especially due to the cardiovascular problems due to the number of factors. So let's study what are those all factors they will contribute to the cardiovascular disease in case of chronic kidney disease. So one of the factor that will actually cause cardiovascular disease or worsen the cardiovascular disease is actually hyperphosphatemia. So hyperphosphatemia, I have already discussed, it will lead to the calcification of blood vessels. So either the blood vessels or anything in the blood vessels will get hardened due to the calcification. So the hardening of blood vessels will take place. Example is if a person is having erythematous plaque. So if a person is having erythematous plaque, so let's suppose this is a vessel, and here we have the erythematous plaque, but now the plaque is not doing any kind of disturbance more, so that the clinical features will be evident. But let's suppose if there is a calcium and phosphate is deposited in the plaque, let's suppose in the hardening of the vessels, the plaque is also hardened due to the calcium and phosphate deposited in the plaque, and due to which the plaque hardens. And now when the plaque is hardened and now the vessels constrict and dilate, what happens? The plaque can be ruptured. As the vessels dilate and constrict, the plaque is hardened, so the plaque will be more prone to rupture. And in such the case, after the rupturing of the plaque, the embolus can be released, and the embolus can block the coronary vessels. And once the coronary vessels is blocked, it will lead to the myocardial infarction and the angina. So such a condition can be seen in case of the chronic kidney disease. And one of the example of the hyperphosphatemia, and due to the hyperphosphatemia, ultimately it's lead to the myocardial infarction, and ultimately it's lead to death. So the example of this patient, one real example is Indian Foreign Minister was Sushma Swaraj. So the Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj's death was basically due to the myocardial infarction, but actually she was a known case of the chronic kidney disease. The patient of the CKD will have the serious abnormality, especially if there are some risk factor. So I have already discussed about one of the risk factor, that is hyperphosphatemia, and I think now you will understand that how hyperparathyroidism also can lead to the cardiovascular abnormality, as ultimately the hyperparathyroidism will ultimately the reason of hyperparathyroidism was actually hyperphosphatemia. So in this condition, in this way you can know that these two conditions lead to the cardiovascular abnormality. So another especially the risk factor is two types, that is traditional risk factor and CKD risk factor. So the traditional risk factor is that if a person is already having the hypertension, and if he or she develops the CKD, then the CKD will worsen that hypertension and will ultimately cause the cardiovascular abnormality. If the person is having the hyperlipidemia or having the hypercholesteremia, hypertriglyceridemia from previous, then he may have the CKD, and after the CKD the hyperlipidemia can be worsened, and especially the sympathetic overactivity is also worsened on development of CKD. Now in after CKD, the person, if the person is having hypertension after the development of CKD, then this is also one of the cardiovascular abnormality. And already discussed about the hyperphosphatemia and hyperparathyroidism, that these two are the main agents that is responsible for the cardiovascular abnormality, that they will lead to the myocardial infarction or the left ventricular hypertrophy. And there is one more thing, that is a generalized inflammation. This generalized inflammation actually occurs in CKD patient, and they will also lead to the cardiovascular abnormality. We will discuss this. and there is another condition, sleep apnea. This will also lead to the cardiovascular abnormality. So let's see how the generalized inflammation and why the generalized inflammation occur and how it actually causes the cardiovascular abnormality. Now see, whenever the GFR is decreased, there is accumulation of the waste products, especially the nitrogenous waste and other all the waste. This all the waste condition, whatever the waste products are accumulated, so these waste products will lead to the inflammatory condition all over the body. So the inflammation will be like that, there will be increase in the positive acute phase reactants in the blood. There will be increase in the positive acute phase reactant in the blood, like the cytokine CRP, and there will be decrease in the negative acute phase reactant. So decrease in the negative acute phase reactant like the serum albumin and phetuin. Now the increase in the acute phase reactants will ultimately cause the vascular occlusion, promote the vascular occlusion, the plaque formation and the plaque progression. And the decrease in negative acute phase reactants will rapidify the vascular calcification. So this all will lead to the cardiovascular disease, or will cause the worsening of the cardiovascular disease if already present. Hypertension in case of the CKD will ultimately lead to the left ventricle hypertrophy. So the left ventricle hypertrophy is actually the complication of the hypertension in CKD or the previous hypertension Now this left ventricle hypertrophy will ultimately with time will actually go into failure. So there can be left ventricular failure as the time passes. The left ventricular hypertrophy or hypertrophied heart also cannot perform well, and in the case left ventricle failure also can take place. So if any patient, if there is already myocardial ischemia, left ventricle hypertrophy, or if there is a frank cardiomyopathy, and so if there is these things are if already present, either of these or combination of these, so there can be and we know that in CKD there is a salt water retention. So due to the fluid overload, so this salt water retention means there is a fluid overload, and this fluid overload plus there is a decreased cardiac or abnormal cardiac function, or you can say that this condition will lead to the abnormal cardiac function. So abnormal cardiac function plus the fluid overload due to the CKD, both will lead to ultimately the heart failure. And one of the thing in the heart failure patient will develop, that is pulmonary edema. And the pulmonary edema will have a specific pattern of the bat wing distribution, that the edematous fluid, let's suppose this is alveoli, then the edematous fluid will actually spread around the alveoli in the bat wing fashion. That can be seen in the chest x-ray. And this occurs as the pulmonary capillaries also become leaky in the case of chronic kidney disease. So in the chronic kidney disease, the pulmonary capillaries also become leaky, and due to the leakiness of the capillaries also there is a pulmonary edema. So there is a two cause of pulmonary edema in the CKD. One of the cause is heart failure and another cause is leaky pulmonary capillaries. So up to now we saw that the hyperphosphatemia, secondary hyperparathyroidism, that is increase in level of parathyroid hormone, elevated bone alkaline phosphatase, hypocalcemia, dilutional hyponatremia, and declining GFR. These all features are suggesting the chronic kidney disease. So they are basically suggesting the chronic kidney disease, or they are suggesting the chronicity of the kidney disease. So treatment of the hyperphosphatemia is very necessary in order to treat the hypocalcemia and in order to treat all the manifestation of the bone disease. So for this we will first of all focus on the diet, that the diet should have the low phosphate content. So there will be low phosphate diet. Another thing we can give, that whatever the phosphate is present in the blood, we want that the phosphate in the diet, whatever the diet phosphate in the diet, they will also get actually not absorbed in the intestinal tract. So phosphate binding agents are taken with the meal. They will cause the decreased gastrointestinal absorption of phosphate, and the drugs are basically the sevelamer and the lanthanum. So sevelamer and lanthanum actually decreases the GI absorption of phosphate, and you should also take low phosphate diet. So by these two measures, the hyperphosphatemia can be treated. Now there is a drug known as cinacalcet. Cinacalcet is basically calcium mimetic drug that it acts as a calcium. So its structure is similar to calcium, calcium like structure, and actually they will. So this drug will actually sensitize the calcium sensitive receptor of the parathyroid gland and decreases the parathyroid production. And if the parathyroid hormone production is decreased, then the bone fragility or bone resorption will decrease. So bone fragility will decrease and the bone resorption will get decreased. As we know that the hypocalcemia was actually stimulating the parathyroid gland and was actually increasing the parathyroid hormone production. So if we will give the calcitriol, that is a vitamin D3, then this vitamin D3 will actually increase the calcium absorption from the GI tract and will actually prevent the hypocalcemia. And if there will be less hypocalcemia, then there will be less PTH activation, or we can say there will be suppression of the PTH gland, and there will be suppression of the PTH production. So there will be less PTH production or parathyroid production, and there will be, if there will be less parathyroid hormone production, then there will be less bone weakening. So the bone weakening will be less. So this so calcitriol, and that's why in not very large dose but in recommended daily allowance, you should give the vitamin D3 plus calcium. Never give alone calcium. So only calcium therapy supplementation is very dangerous for the patient, as if you will give the only calcium supplementation, so only calcium supplementation will actually bind to the phosphate and will lead to the calcification. Vascular will lead to the vascular calcification. So this is not good. You should always give with the vitamin D3, as the vitamin D3 directly also suppresses the PTH production. Now let's see how hyperkalemia occurs in case of CKD and how to treat the hyperkalemia when in CKD patient. So normally what happens, if due to any reason, if there is an increased potassium level in the blood, then the two homeostatic mechanism in the normal person acts. One mechanism is that the potassium is excreted from the secretion from the distal convoluted tubular cells into the urine. So the potassium can be excreted in urine by the secretion of the distal convoluted tubule cells, and the potassium can also lost from the GI tract. So the potassium can be excreted in the urine, and the potassium can be excreted in the GI tract, either in the form of the stool. Now, so in this way, the potassium level is maintained. But what happens in case of the chronic kidney disease? So if the patient is having chronic kidney disease, and if there is the condition like increased potassium intake, or in the CKD, usually there is an increased protein if there is increased protein intake, or if there is a increased hemolysis, or if there is a metabolic acidosis, or if there is a generalized inflammation, these all conditions lead to the increased potassium in the blood. These all condition will lead to the increased potassium in the blood. And also you should keep one thing in mind, that usually the patient of CKD, due to the hypertension, in CKD you know that the hypertension develops, it develops very early, either basically in stage 2, and they used to take the ACE inhibitors or the ARB. And ACE inhibitors and ARB have a common they have a side effect, that is hyperkalemia, that they will ultimately cause the potassium retention. So these things and this thing ultimately will lead to the hyperkalemia. they will actually overcome these two response, and after overcoming these two response is acting. But though these two response is acting, the potassium level cannot be maintained and will ultimately result in the hyperkalemia. So you can see that the intake of the AC inhibitor or ARB results in the hyperkalemia, or the condition that is developing in the CKD patient like the metabolic acidosis, and as we know the CKD is the generalized inflammation state, then that condition, and if there is any potassium intake, increased intake, or any protein intake or hemolysis, then these all conditions will lead to the hyperkalemia. And there are some more conditions where the actually distal convoluted tubular cells, which are actually secreting the potassium from the cells into the lumen, are actually disrupted. So these cells are, so DCT cells are disrupted in some condition like the diabetic nephropathy. So in diabetic nephropathy, these cells are disrupted. Another condition is basically the obstructive uropathy, and if there is a sickle cell nephropathy, so in these conditions, basically the distal nephron are disrupted, and whenever the distal nephrons are disrupted, the potassium cannot be secreted into the lumen, and due to which the potassium is increased in the blood and ultimately lead to the hyperkalemia. And what are the effects of hyperkalemia? So if the potassium is increased, what thing can happen? So one thing is that it can cause the cardiac arrhythmia. And another thing, the potassium increase can lead to the metabolic acidosis. It can also lead to the, so you should think one thing in mind, that the metabolic acidosis can lead to the hyperkalemia, and hyperkalemia can lead to the metabolic acidosis. So it can also lead to the metabolic acidosis. Now, how the hyperkalemia can lead to the metabolic acidosis? So you should know this concept in a very good way. That, see, usually what happens, if there is an increased potassium, there is an increased chloride in blood. So usually potassium and chloride both are increased in blood, and if the potassium and chloride both are increased, they will actually decrease the ammonia production. And ammonia actually acts as a buffer. So basically you can say that there is a decrease in the buffer, and if there is a decrease in buffer, then you should know that the NH3 usually combines with proton and form the NH4 plus, and this NH4 plus is actually excreted in the urine. So you can easily see that the NH3 is actually buffering the protons, or actually taking the protons with them and excreting in the urine. But if there is a decreased ammonia production, then there will be decreased buffering of the proton, and if there is a decreased buffering, then the proton content in the blood will increase and will lead to the, and proton content increase, it means there is a metabolic acidosis. So in this way there will be metabolic acidosis if there is a hyperkalemia. So we should treat hyperkalemia, as we know that the hyperkalemia is responsible to cause the cardiac arrhythmia and also responsible to cause the hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. We have already seen the pathophysiology. So what are the how to treat hyperkalemia? So hyperkalemia can be treated by avoiding the potassium-rich diet like banana or the potatoes, and use of potassium excreting diuretics. So you should use that kind of diuretics that will actually excrete the potassium, and use of the potassium binding resins like the calcium resonium, sodium polystyrene. So they will basically bind the potassium and loss it via the GI tract. So the GI loss of the potassium is by the potassium binding resins. And if the hyperkalemia is not treated by these measures, then at last we will go for the dialysis. So the last treatment of the any thing in the CKD is dialysis. So you can go for the dialysis. In the now we will see the how metabolic acidosis develops. So in early stage we already studied that the hyperkalemia and the hypercholoremia combination will cause the metabolic acidosis. I already said you about the pathophysiology. So especially in diabetic nephropathy, sickle cell nephropathy or obstructive uropathy, especially the metabolic acidosis process is rapidified, and such type of metabolic acidosis is known as normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. So in early stage, whatever the metabolic acidosis occurs in the patient of CKD, usually that is normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. This occurs in usually in stage 2 or 3 stage. So in 1 to 3 stage, if the metabolic acidosis develops, that is basically the normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, and it is usually treated by the treatment of the hyperkalemia and also by the giving the oral bicarbonates. So oral bicarbonates and hyperkalemia treatment can cure the metabolic acidosis in early stage. But in late stages of chronic kidney disease, usually the urinary excretion of organic acid limits to 30 to 40 millimole per liter. So as the urinary excretion of the organic acid decreases, then it means the organic acid are retained in the body. And as the organic acids that should be excreted, but they are not getting excreted and they are retaining in the body, the anions of the organic acid, that the anions of the retained organic acid leads to increase the anion gap. And in the basic science, we studied that the increase in anion gap will lead to the metabolic acidosis. So high anion gap metabolic acidosis usually occurs in the late stage of CKD. So you can say that in CKD, there are two events. In early stage, there is a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, and this was due to the hyperkalemia and hyperchloremia. And in the late stage of CKD, there is a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, and this is due to the retained organic acid. Okay, so this was about the metabolic acidosis. So the late stage metabolic acidosis is usually corrected by the oral bicarbonate supplementation. So the oral bicarbonate supplementation, and it can be also and the another treatment can be given, that the diuretics. So diuretics will lead to the excretion of the organic acid, and if this also doesn't work, then you can go for the dialysis. So this is a last treatment option in case of metabolic acidosis.